Welcome back, everyone. This is Angel with Phanes, and that's PHANESX.com, PHANESX.com. And it's been a while since we released any kind of audio, and this interview was actually recorded several months ago. It's an interview with Rudolf of Thoth Hermes, and that's THOTHERMES.com. And we'll be discussing the occult, the esoteric, Freemasonry, and other subjects of mutual interest. I hope you like it. Rudolf, thank you for joining us.
Well, it's a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me, Angel.
No, it's great to speak to you again. So you run the Thoth Hermes podcast, which is, I believe, about a year old.
That's true, yes. Exactly, 13 months, by the way, yeah.
Okay, mm-hmm. Well, happy birthday and congratulations on that.
Thank you.
And so you've interviewed quite a few, let's say, heavy hitters in the world of esotericism, and some people that, it's sort of gone off my radar, but that I was aware of, 20 years ago, like Dolores Ashcroft Nowicki,
yes.
Which was a surprise to me, quite a big surprise. So perhaps you could, we'll get on to your podcast soon, but perhaps you could tell us just about your background and why you got into esotericism and podcasting, and what's your interest in this world.
Yes, well, how much time have we got? No, that's very kind. Yes, well, I'm 57 years old, so I'm not a young bird anymore. And as opposed to many other people that I interview or that I hear or that are my friends, I have not started this at age 10 or so, when they had a lot of them had their first experiences. Somehow I seem to have taken my time before I found out about that world, so to speak. Even when the first things occurred to me, which was in my early 20s, I would say, like it was mostly shamanism at the time. It was a curiosity and a kind of want to discover new things rather than a real drive towards the esoteric and occult worlds that came all together much, much later. And actually, it was mostly through the writings of another Austrian, Rudolf Steiner, which I started reading in my late 20s, and which really made me discover a lot of that world, and especially his first 5 books, which are the books he has written himself, and which are not copies of his speeches, which all the later books are actually. So these early 5 works are really very much came out of theosophy and developed into his own philosophy called anthroposophy, and so that taught me a lot, and especially opened a completely new world to me. And so I went through that phase, and after that, more and more I was interested in the world, so to speak, and its different ways of looking at it and feeling and experiencing it. And at some point, surprisingly enough, because that's not completely obvious to everyone, I would think, I then through that came into stepped into Freemasonry. Mm-hmm. And as it is over here in Europe mostly, and especially in Austria, it's rather unusual that you write a letter to Grand Lodge and say, hey, I would be interested to become a Freemason.
Right.
It mostly happens that someone who knows you or who you know would approach you and say, wouldn't you be interested, blah, blah. And in my case, that was different. So I had no one I knew, or it was not clear to me that they would have been Freemasons. So, but I got interested in that through history of religions, through Mircea Eliade and his 5 great books on that, about religious tolerance, about tolerance in general, about accepting the other person, how he or she is. And that all fascinated me. And I lived in France at the time. Maybe that influenced me as well. And yeah, when I came back to Austria, I wrote a letter to Grand Lodge, as I said, and took 3 years, because of course when you write like that, they examine you. Who's that guy? And so 3 years later, that's now exactly 25 years back, I was initiated. And ever since then, with all how to say, with all distance to certain, or reserve to certain developments also in Freemasonry, but in general, I must say it has always been a pleasure and a big joy for me. I've later on joined the Scottish Rite as well, and so that's really a big part of my esoteric life as well, because I live Masonry, and I know that you and I have something in common there. I live Masonry more the esoteric way than maybe the way like Rotary clubs, which you can also do, but it's a different approach. Yeah, and later on I have to take it from there. The ritual became part of my life, so ritual magic, when I went further, became an important part. I tried several groups, but no group really made me happy. So I decided to become more of a solitaire worker with attachment to one or the other group from time to time when I need it. But I prefer to do the deeper esoteric and occult work, which is part of my daily routine, actually. I prefer to do that as a solitaire worker, I would say.
So how do you feel that Freemasonry does or does not connect to these other groups? Or you mentioned magic. Do you feel that that's a part of Freemasonry, or that's something beyond Freemasonry? Or
well, I always feel Freemasonry as it exists today, as being like a big filter, for people who are interested in that. I find it extremely interesting that many, if not most of the groups that have been founded at the end of the 19th century, for example, those magical groups or occult groups, have kind of grown out of Freemasonry.
Yeah, so you mean like the Ordo Templi Orientis and the Golden Dawn, exactly, among others, right?
Among others, exactly. Bota and all those. And I find that speaks for itself, because also today I have started working in a small group within our Grand Lodge with brothers who are more interested than others in the esoteric content, and we do ritual work in that respect as well. And of course, it's a small number, but those people who they're a bit like me, they would never want to give up Freemasonry for something else, because it has brought them where they are. So, right. I think it's I would call it, from my perspective, a kind of filter into magical or occult. The words are so difficult for me to use, because the word esoteric has been abused so much that I'm very hesitant to use it. But then when you say occult, of course it's misunderstood. Yes, even though it's very much the thing. And then you said that one day, and I found that very conclusive. We are using Western esoteric tradition as a kind of a whitewashed expression for occultism.
Yes, exactly. That's right. Yeah, and I think that's demonstrably the case, right? Notably, this is what's discussed at college, but what they're really discussing is what would have been called the occult 20 years ago. So, but exactly. Anyway, yeah. I mean, I would just say with Freemasonry, and I think we probably have a little bit of a difference of opinion, but we certainly share similar interests. But I would slightly counterbalance what you say by pointing out that, although yes, most of the sort of occult orders of the late 19th century were founded by Freemasons, but then so were most workers' unions and this kind of thing were also based on Freemasonry, and certainly most college fraternities as well. And I think it's sort of partly the human imagination that you can get so many different interpretations from philosophy or let's say esoteric societies, or from religion as well. Look at the differences that a single religion will manifest in terms of interpretations. But regardless, it's certainly the case that Freemasonry has had a huge impact on the occult world and on quote-unquote Western esotericism as a whole.
Yeah, I understand what you mean. I think that what you were explaining about those other fraternities, let's go like unions, etc. That's true for the Anglo-Saxon world, for the English-speaking world. But funny enough, I'm contradicting myself. Funny enough, of course, also all those groups that I was mentioning have mostly come out of the Anglo-Saxon world. So
that's true.
But in a way, I think the development of Masonry on the European continent has been a bit different from that.
Oh, yes. I mean, there definitely seems to be differences between European and Anglo-Saxon Freemasonry, or English-speaking Freemasonry, certainly. Yeah.
Certainly, yeah.
So, so you mentioned the Scottish Rite as well. I don't know how much you want to talk about it, but yeah, and you were mentioning that the sort of Masonic ritual is something that you live. So perhaps you could just explain a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, the Scottish Rite, as we practice it here in Austria, we are going very slowly. I've been member of the Scottish Rite now for almost 10 years, and I'm now in the 25th degree, so we are really taking it step by step.
Okay.
And I must say that I quite enjoy that way of going through it, because there's a lot of new things to learn. Of course, when you have done a lot of esoteric and occult work yourself outside of Masonry, at some point you recognize that you get to be taught or be told new things, so to speak, new things in the Scottish Rite, which you have come across already in other groups or in other teachings. But it's always interesting to have the Masonic point of view on those teachings again. And I enjoy the fraternity in there. Funny enough, I said before, it's hard for me to work in groups, to work the occult in groups, but in Masonry, the group has become very important to me, and that is more true, funny enough, in the Scottish Rite than in the Blue Lodges. I feel more connection to my brothers there. It's hard to explain why. I don't want to blame anyone in the Blue Lodges, and I know that that's the base of everything, and it's very important, and I feel very well there. But the feeling of connectedness, so to speak, is for me stronger in the Scottish Rite than in the Blue Lodges. Maybe. I mean, we meet every week, it's
really? Okay.
Both in the Scottish Rite and in the Blue Lodge. So it can be compared, but it's of course easier to get that feeling when you meet once a week rather than every other month.
Yes, right, exactly. Yeah. And so perhaps you could just explain a little bit with the scale it back a little bit. What is Freemasonry exactly, and what are the rituals? What's going on?
You mean to me?
Yes.
Yes. Well, I had when I became a Mason 25 years ago, I had no idea what to expect. Right? It was really for me. I mean, I had read those books that everyone reads, but deliberately I stopped reading when it became too explicit, right? Oh, and okay. So I really wanted to live the experience when I was finally initiated. And to me, at least, as the way I am, I think this was a good thing. So I really walked into there the first. I remember, like we were yesterday. I remember having entered the temple for the first time with my eyes covered and hear the voice of the worshipful master there, and that voice I still hear it like yesterday, right? And so I'm a musician and a theater performing artist by profession. So the ear is something that's very important to me. So maybe that's part of the experience. But after that, I was lucky enough that I saying the brother and I who were initiated the same day, we call that that there is a master who is detached here to teach the young to teach the young brethren when they are after they have been initiated. So who accompanies them for the first years until they become masters, right?
Okay.
And yeah,
and so what form does that take? How do they instruct them?
That depends very much on the person, but we were lucky enough that this elderly gentleman was a very experienced Mason. He took the time every other week, so every second meeting we had, we would meet an hour before the meeting, and he would sit down with us and go through ritual, go through symbols, explain certain ideas, etc., etc. And this gave me a base over 2 or 3 years until I became a master, which to me is until today invaluable, because today I wouldn't interpret things the same way like he did at the time, but still it gave me a solid base to build upon,
Right.
And I think I was very lucky, because when I look at young brethren today, or even at the time, not many had been guided in that same way by some person like that. And at some point, to me, maybe like to many others, it was the most important thing was the brotherhood and fraternity and tolerance and charity and all those other things that are humanistic part of Masonry, which is extremely important and which I wouldn't want to miss for a minute. But the deeply rooted part, it always interested me. I always asked those questions that no one else asked at the time. So there was something more for me behind that all the time. And but it took me some years to discover the reality of that. And today I would say that the esoteric content of Masonry and the humanistic part of Masonry, to put it bluntly like that, which are sometimes give you the feeling that they are opposed, at least those who practice Masonry in one or the other way don't always accept the other way. They don't practice. And to me, this is not true. To me, I can hopefully become a better person because I do the esoteric part of the work.
Right, sure.
And I'm not sure everybody sees it like that, but to me, one demands the other. It is not, and that's for me not the secret of Masonry, don't get me wrong, but that's to me one of the big points where I think that Masonry is kind of unique, because it has both parts in it, if you accept both parts. And again, I can only speak for myself, but if you accept both parts, that's when you make it a good experience.
Right. Well, you've mentioned the word esoteric quite a few times, and you're contrasting it to the more exoteric, or let's say the more outer aspects. So how would you define those? How do you see them working together? What are they exactly?
Well, I will give you an example. When I was worshipful master of my lodge, for example, when we light the three lights, right? That's a bit different, maybe in our ritual than in the one that is being practiced in North America. But the three big candles of wisdom, of strength, and of beauty are lit. And at the moment that they are lit by the master of ceremony, the worshipful master, and then the first and the senior, the junior deacon, as you call them, say a phrase. And the same thing happens when those three candles are extinguished again by the master of ceremony. And the way you pronounce those phrases, right? To me, they are evocation and invocation. And when I was worshipful master, I practiced this in that way. I tried to do it in that way, like it was an invocation or an evocation. And I wouldn't tell that my brethren, because they are not into the same practice than I am, and I don't want to put any pressure on anyone to accept my point of view on this. But I am sure well, my reputation was that the rituals that I did were rather impressive. But I'm sure that's part of the reason, because I tried to put that part of Masonry into the way I led the ritual. And even if you are not yourself seeing Masonry that way, you feel something.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, it's just as well if you say, well, we lit the candle of wisdom, and that's my phrase, and I say it, and I mean it, but I mean it in an exoteric way. That's fine.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, it's just a different level of energy, or a level of consciousness, if you want to say a big word about it.
Mm.
And so you can, and that's to me one of the miracles of Masonry, that it works both ways.
Mm. Right. And in other cultures, the esoteric and the exoteric seem to be the esoteric seems to be a lot more open in some regards. Taoism is essentially a form of esotericism, but it's perfectly a normal part of traditional Chinese culture as well. So
yes.
So do you think that Freemasonry serves that role? Is that something that we've lost in the West, or is it something different in the West, do you think?
That's a very good question. Maybe again here I have a bit a European or even Austrian point of view, because Masonry, I mean, we are about 3,500 Masons in a country of 8 million, so it's a small number. And also historically, Masonry hasn't existed that long of those 300 years, right? So I wouldn't say that Freemasonry is at all part of the day-to-day culture in this country. But of course, the underlying ideas are, because when I say underlying ideas, I mean mainly what I call the humanistic or exoteric part, right? I mean, accept the other as he or she is, and of course, it's part of the Western tradition as well. But we need to be remembered all the time, otherwise we lose that. And Masonry is one way to remind us that this is necessary.
So what is Freemasonry teaching in the exoteric, do you think? So tolerance, it seemed to be suggested by your last comment.
Yes, absolutely. Tolerance is something very important. Also, that personal development, which is another expression I don't really like, but personal development is certainly an important part to it.
Yeah.
If you give me a better expression for it, then I'll be happy. But I think that is important. And I also must say that some of those exoteric underlying ideas get a bit lost at the time. I remember in the beginning that we were told that when two brethren have a legal fight, I don't want to go that far, but have some problems in the profane world, not within Masonry, but if they are brethren and they will know and find out that they are, that before they go to court, they need to try to solve the problem out of court. It was like a mandatory to do that.
Right.
At least that's what we were taught when I was a young Freemason. I haven't heard that over the last 10 years anymore, you see. And of course you can interpret that in the wrong way, and that then leads us to all those, when you type Freemasonry on Google, that you find first 25 entries about world corruption and so on before you come to the content of Freemasonry. But of course you can misinterpret that and say, okay, they're just doing it secretly and behind the veil and find a solution to help themselves. But that's, to me, not the sense of such a rule, for example. It is that human beings should be able to find solutions for problems they have among themselves and at least try to do that. And only if it's impossible, then do the next step, which is the law or the court.
Yeah, right.
Just that's one tiny example, but that to me it's a very important one.
Yeah, exactly. So, in regard to your other pursuits that we might call esotericism or the occult, would you want to go into your interests there, or?
Well, a little bit. I'm very eclectic. It's very strange. I always, when I'm asked what's your main direction or your main school or whatever, it's hard for me to define, because it's a mix of ceremonial magic, of a bit of OTO, a bit of chaos magic. It's many things, and that makes up Rudolph's magic in the end. I'm a big fan of the books and the way she teaches of Josephine McCarthy, for example.
Okay.
I find that the way she brings up things is very contemporary, is very open-minded, and leaves a lot of room to everyone in a way, but still comes back to the roots all the time. So but mentioning her, of course, I should also have mentioned Egyptian backgrounds that are important to me, and maybe there's the link to Masonry as well. But I couldn't. I do my daily practice every morning, and sometimes a bit in the evening when I have time, and that practice evolves from week to week, and does not only evolve, hopefully, to go deeper and to go further. I hope so. But it also develops and evolves in itself. So I'm not doing the same ritual every day, you know. Suddenly next week it's something else, because I feel now it's necessary for me to do the middle pillar ritual, for example, right?
Yeah.
To say something simple, right? And but the middle pillar ritual is something that I really love and is very strong, I think. And
perhaps you could just explain what the middle pillar ritual is.
Sure. The middle pillar ritual is something I learned from the books of Israel Regardie, which has initially come, I believe, from the Golden Dawn tradition.
Yeah.
And it's a ritual where you try to balance the middle pillar of the Kabbalistic tree, of the tree of life, right? In your own body, transform it into your own body. And so that's said in one sentence, and so you concentrate on those 4 spots that are 5, in fact, because you also use da'at, the hidden spot as well, and you try to create that energy and make it flow around your own body, and that should give you strength and impulse for what you're up to afterwards. And so that's very simply said what the middle pillar ritual is. But well, as I said, I might feel that I need that energy. That's why I do it that week or that day. And the following week, it might be something completely different, because I go into another state of feeling, or state of. I try to. And that's where I think, I hope she would agree when I'm saying that, but that's where I think I'm joining Josephine McCarthy a bit. The where you are and when you are is very important. For example, when she says that when you do magic somewhere where you live, find out about what happened in that place historically, you know, in the little town you live, what happened during the war? Was there a lot of death during the war? So that influences the energy that's in that place, and you have to work with that energy. So magic to me is not something that can be seen as detached from where and when you live. For example, and so I might feel something like that one day, and that's why I want to react to it.
Right. And you mentioned ceremonial magic and chaos magic, so perhaps you could just explain a little bit what they are or what the differences are.
Sure. I mean, chaos magic, maybe that's easier to explain. Chaos magic is a way of practicing magic that has been developed in the 1970s, I believe, 70s and 80s, and it's a typical child of its time. When the more traditional and more organized and more ritualized, let's put it that way, approach to magic, which is ceremonial magic, has been broken up by saying, well, do what you want at that moment and do it the way you feel it, and be the hippie magician in a way, you know. Chaos magic works very much with the person that does it and with the moment and he or she does it, and everything that is done in that spirit is right to be done, whereas ceremonial magic is more formalized and goes as far as telling you what the color of the robe that you should be wearing that day should be, or what color the candle that you're lighting should be. You know, it can be very strict sometimes. To me, it's often a bit too strict. But then it also, at least that's the way it works for me. Ceremonial magic is important to me to bring me back on the spot, even if it's sometimes a bit annoying to follow all those rules very strictly. Right. But suddenly, when you do it, you also find out it has a sense, and in a way. Maybe I'm blasphemic for certain ceremonial magicians now, but to me, it's not so much that if the color of the candle is right or green that is important, but that you follow what's in the paper you're following. You know, it's a question of your own mind that you concentrate on what's being asked for and follow it. And when you are refocused like that, then I can go into more chaos again. Because I get the grounding that I need to be a bit chaotic from time to time.
I see. Well, I think one thing that it makes me ask, and maybe not just when I'm speaking to you, but you mentioned about wearing robes of a specific color and this kind of thing, and I think that a lot of people would ask, and I might ask, is this necessary? What? Why go to such elaborate procedures?
Well, you're a Mason. You're a Mason angel. So I'm asking you: is it necessary to walk in that direction around the lodge, or couldn't you walk just the other way around as well? There are certain things. Maybe you'll only find out later on why they are necessary. But I also admit that, the rope thing goes a bit too far for me, right? And honestly, certain videos on YouTube, which are not meant to be critical, but are meant to be serious, they make me laugh, right? Sorry, I'm not going to mention any names, but maybe those people who know what I mean will know what I mean.
Yeah, well, I know what you mean. So.
But I think certain rules apply and they help. And at some point you find out which are the ones that help and which are the ones that are unnecessary. But until you find out, wait and do. Okay,
fair enough. So perhaps we should get on to the subject of Thoth Hermes.
Yes, with pleasure.
Yeah. So what is Thoth Hermes?
Thoth Hermes is a website and podcast that I have created, as you said, a bit more than a year ago now. And before we go any further, I have to apologize to those of your listeners who are also listeners of Thoth Hermes for not having been so productive the last few months. I'll come back to that in a minute. But Thoth Hermes was an idea of mine which has been several years old, because when I started working more regularly and more with more interest and more curiosity in this field, I was helped myself by some podcasts, which at that time, 10, 12 years ago, were not so many. And one of them was the one of our common great friend, Greg Kaminsky Occultic Personality, which I think is still to me the top of what I've experienced. And I've learned so much from those podcasts. Yeah, it was not just Occultic Personality, also a few others, but they were really helpful to me. And at maybe 3 or 4 years ago, I said, well, I want to do that also, but not just to be one more, but also follow certain examples, which certainly Occultic Personality is one of them, but also to have a European touch to it.
Okay.
Because the many of those traditions that we are talking about, they were not only rooted in Europe, but even especially around the area where I am from. So this axis from Prague to Vienna, the alchemical part and a lot of things that you traditionally came Italy, Austria, Czech Republic, it wasn't called like that then, but and Germany, right? And Berlin especially. And so I wanted to have an approach from that end as well. And so came the idea of doing that podcast. But I wanted to build a kind of community first and not throw it just out into the empty space, because I wouldn't think that would have worked. So hesitantly, because I'm not a Facebooker, but hesitantly I created my Gnosis Ton pseudonym there and built a little community. And it was much more fun and interesting than I would have thought to build that community, actually.
That's good.
Because I found people like yourself, Angel, and quite a number of interesting people I met through that.
Good.
And then I don't even remember how exactly it happened that I found out that Greg was not doing so well health-wise about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago now. It's 2 years back now already. I was a simple listener at the time, right? But with my plan, building a podcast in a few months. And so I wrote to Greg and said, look, I explained to him from the very beginning what I was going to do, but if he needed some help, then, well, let me know, basically. And he took me up on that. And so I started to be co-host on Occultic Personality, which is a great pleasure and honor, I must say, to me, because I keep believing what I said a few moments ago about that podcast, and to be now also part of that is great for me. And so then finally I was ready, technically ready. I had my community together and the courage and a bit of time, and I launched Thoth Hermes. And I'm very happy to say that. Yeah, I think after the 5th episode or so, I was nominated together with Occultic Personality as being among the best occult podcasts that are around, which was a great pleasure by Spiral Nature, by that magazine.
Right, yeah.
And I must say that the audience is increasing ever since then. Even over those 3 months where I had to make a pause, I got nice emails and messages and stuff. And when I launched a month ago Tobias Churton's interview, which was the last that I did, I immediately had the audience back, and I hit a new record immediately on that first week again. So that was a big joy for me to see that people hadn't let me go. And so I just ask everyone to bear with me for another few weeks until the end of June this year, because I'm at the moment doing 2 day jobs because I'm changing jobs. And so I have until the end of June to bring in the successor in my management job that I'm doing, and at the same time already do my new job in order not to lose it again. So that's a bit tough on me at the moment, and that's why there is not a lot of time and energy especially left for Thoth Hermes. But I promise, and that's not just a promise, because I have concrete plans that not only Thoth Hermes will be back in full strength in July, but also I plan new stuff for the fall, which will be some features from time to time on special topics, etc. So bear with me, and I hope you'll enjoy Thoth Hermes just as much as I do.
Sure. Well, I personally have enjoyed it. It's been excellent so far. So,
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, on that note, where can people go to find out more about you? Thoth Hermes website would be.
Yeah, the Thoth Hermes website would be probably best.
Yeah.
That's Thoth Hermes with that famous only one H in the middle, so it's THOTHERMES.com, and so they'll find all the necessary information.
Thank you very much for talking with us.
Thank you.